Hello guys, welcome back to another one of my videos. My name is Rena. How have you guys been doing? In today's video, we'll be listening to a podcast by Mile Higher where they have an open-minded conversation about crime, conspiracy, and the unexplained. In today's video, we'll be looking back on an event that took place in 2019, a volcano eruption. So before we get into this video, make sure to drop a like on this video, subscribe, leave a comment down below. Will be greatly appreciated by moi. Let us get into this video.
After this photo was taken, the tour guide leading their group just screamed, "Run." And as they ran, Crystal's phone was still taking the video. This is something that a lot of people don't know about the White Island volcano disaster, which is what we're going to be talking about today.
The White Island eruption, it happened on an island called White Island, and it's New Zealand's most active volcano. So once you arrive on the island, you have to boat out there. And once you arrive on it, you get to take a hike to the caldera, which is the large volcanic crater, which is like the highlight of the tour. So on December 4th, 2019, the Royal Caribbean cruise ship Ovation of the Seas set sail from Sydney for New Zealand for a 12-day cruise. All the passengers were offered a day trip pass to White Island, and this was an opportunity to step foot on a real-life volcano. Sounds like an adventure.
Having
like, sure.
No idea the potential dangers.
Yes. So everyone who went was given a brochure with safety precautions, which has been disputed, and everything else that they needed to know about this particular tourist adventure.
And we say everything else they needed to know, as in everything the cruise company apparently thought they should know.
Right, which was not much. But the brochure said that they would get close to the drama. Hard hats and gas masks would be provided so that they could get close to roaring steam vents, bubbling pits of mud, hot volcanic streams, and the amazing lake of steaming acid.
Maybe I'm not adventurous, but I wouldn't go.
And all guests were told to just wear closed-toed shoes and be prepared for a strenuous hike, and that wheelchair users were discouraged from attending. But other than that, the cruise line would take care of everything, and it would just be a wonderful day on White Island. On December 9th, 2019, the big day arrived. It was time to visit White Island on a 6-hour tour. And there were about 100 tourists who were loaded onto 3 boats, and these boats were called the PJ4, the Phoenix, and the Te Pua Whakaari. Also, there was 2 helicopters that were going out that day from Volcanic Air, which brought small groups to the island around the same time as these White Island tour boats are going out. And one of the helicopters was piloted by Brian DePau, and he had a group of 4 German tourists with him that day. There was also a Brazilian tourist named Alessandro Kaufman and his wife Arlene, who were passengers on the second boat that went out called the Phoenix. And Alessandro decided to document the trip in a vlog. He was kind of, vlogging. He's not like a big vlogger or anything, but he was out there with his cameras and his GoPro filming for much of the day, which is actually how we have a lot of footage from this day is from him.
Boat passengers were given a small metal cone with a colored dot as a boarding pass. They handed the cones to the crew members as they boarded as a physical record of how many people were on board. They were all provided gas masks and yellow hard hats. And then crew members wore orange hats and striped shirts so that they could clearly differentiate themselves from the passengers. So the boats dropped their anchors near the island, and then the crew loads passengers into these other smaller inflatable rafts. They had about 6 to 10 of them, and then they would, slowly move them over to the island. And then crew members helped them off the rafts and onto a jetty, which is a small dock or a landing platform at the edge of the island. Before the hike, there was a safety meeting, and everyone was reminded to stay on the path and in between tour guides all the time. They were warned not to touch anything or take anything. The guides led them up the winding path towards the caldera, and as they got closer, several people put on their gas masks. There were clouds of white steam rising from the ground, and the group stepped around what looked like a pond of steam. But the water was boiling hot, at least 100 degrees Celsius, which is 212 degrees Fahrenheit. One of the guides warned them not to get too close, and he reminded everyone to put their masks on if they needed them and to turn around and crouch down if they were engulfed in any steam. The path to the crater was rocky, but the landscape of the island is absolutely breathtaking. It really does look like being on another planet.
It does.
There's yellow sulfur crystals that brightens up the rocks, algae that turns the streams green, brown, and red. So it's just a huge array of colors. So as the groups from the Phoenix start heading back down the path, they spotted Brian's Volcanic Air helicopter on a landing pad. The Phoenix was waiting near the shore, ready for its passengers to board. The returning group walked through the ruins of the abandoned sulfur mines, and Alessandro captured all of this on video. The island was calm at this time. The sky was bright and clear, and you can see the camera tilt down towards his watch. It was 1:49 p.m.
The PJ4 boat was heading back to the mainland at this point, and the Fakari boat had just arrived around 1 p.m. with all of its 42 passengers and crew members. And on the Fakari boat, the passengers were divided into two groups of 19, which were each led by two guides. 25-year-old Kelsey Waghorn led the first group up the path to the crater lake, assisted by 19-year-old Jake Milbank, who was celebrating his birthday that day. 40-year-old Hayden Marshall Inman led the second group, which was assisted by 24-year-old Tiffany Mangi. And this was Hayden's 1,111th trip to the volcano. Around 2 o'clock, Kelsey's group was almost back to the shore, and the passengers of the Phoenix had all boarded. The first helicopter from Volcanic Air left at 2:05. Brian was preparing his 4 passengers to board his helicopter and planned to take off in just a few minutes. Hayden's group from the Fakari boat was heading up the path to Crater Lake at this time, and 24-year-old Stephanie Browett was in this group with her father Paul and 21-year-old sister Crystal. And their mother Marie had actually stayed back on the cruise ship that day. But the family had taken, this trip on the cruise to celebrate Crystal's 21st birthday. As Hayden's group walked toward Crater Lake, Stephanie took in the surroundings. Her and Crystal heard their tour guide talking about the volcano, and Crystal was actually taking some video. The guide was actually explaining to them that White Island is at a volcanic alert level of 2 and approaching level 3. And what that means is that...
So why are they on the island when it's at 2?
Once it hits level 3, the volcano is literally erupting. So it's the level right before a volcano erupts, and there they are on the island. And Stephanie wasn't sure what level 2 meant, but she knew that cutting the tour short was probably a bad sign. And they actually took a picture, Crystal, Stephanie, and their father Paul together in front of the steam coming off of Crater Lake.
So seconds after this photo was taken, the tour guide leading their group just screamed, "Run." And as they ran, Crystal's phone was still taking the video, which is really unbelievable. She got the closest footage to this for sure.
It's hard to watch, but Crystal's phone captures the frenzied moments and sheer terror unfolding at 11 minutes past 2 as the volcano erupts.
That must be the scariest moment no one wants to experience.
Everything around them became dark all of a sudden, and they couldn't see or breathe at all because the air was so thick and hot that it literally burned their skin.
The force was just that strong that my whole body was being shoved and pushed and rolled onto the ground. I was just hitting things while getting burnt at the same time. It was the most terrifying moment of my life.
Moments before, the Phoenix was moving away from the island, and the captain had told passengers to look up in the distance at a few small dots in the steam cloud around the crater lake. And those dots were members of Hayden's group, standing right on the edge of the lake. So they knew that people were on there. At 2:10, Hayden's group was heading down the path, and Stephanie and her family were posing for their picture in front of the lake. Kelsey's group was waiting near the shore. Then 1 minute later, at 2:11, the passengers on the Phoenix, who were all heading away from the island, saw a tower of steam suddenly shoot up from the center of the island. And this is all captured by Alessandro on the boat. So there's an amazing clip of this.
Well, there's like a couple different people took clips of it, of the actual eruption itself. But I mean,
his is the best.
It's absolutely insane. The quality is actually really good of this clip, but God. And no.
Imagine that there are people on the island, you're on a boat, but there are people on the island, and that's the view you get. Violence for those.
Like just seeing the people on the crater's edge as you're pulling away from the island, and then this happens. As everybody's seeing this massive column of ash and steam just bursting like 12,000 feet into the air, the captain of the Fakari boat was close to shore still and actually saw the blast firsthand. And that's when he grabbed his radio and shouted, "Evacuate." Brian screamed, jumped into the water as he dove in himself, and 2 of his German passengers dove into the water after him, but the other 2 that were with him didn't make it in time. Moments later, a second burst sent ash, steam, rock, and acid gas barreling across the island and out onto the ocean right toward the Phoenix. So in a matter of minutes, the entire island was swallowed by bright white steam and gray ash, and debris within the burst was flying at speeds of 100 meters per second. And as the toxic cloud spilled over the ocean and toward the Phoenix, the captain ordered everyone inside, and the skipper quickly steered the boat out of harm's way.
Were there people still on the island?
Yeah, there were. Jesus. Oh, man. I'm shocked. Oh, look. Oh, look,
Oh my God,
look at
there
the
are
boat.
people there.
Because the color of the island is covered in ash. That's why they call it White Island.
And when the clouds settled, the entire surface of the island was covered in gray ash, just one continuous monotone color.
Can't even breathe.
And once they were safely out of the ash cloud, crew members on the Phoenix prepared for a rescue operation and launched inflatable rafts. At this point, 47 people were still on the island, including 38 passengers from the cruise ship, and Kelsey's group was near the shore. Hayden's group was trapped up at the crater. Those inside the Phoenix could see Kelsey's group covered in ash gathered on the landing platform. Also, the force of the blast was so strong that Brian's 1.5-ton helicopter had been thrown from its landing pad. So as you can imagine, this was really scary for people. Everyone was frantic on the island. It was total chaos. The crew had to get everyone on the island into inflatable rafts and then onto the Phoenix. And they were just panicking. So it's hard to kind of organize people. And obviously everyone wants to get to safety first. The survivors and passengers asked the crew repeatedly when help was coming. You know, that's the biggest concern, is they're stuck on an island. So crew members expected search and rescue helicopters to just arrive at any moment. They rescued the guides, Kelsey and Jake, and the 19 passengers in their group, along with Brian and his 4 guests, who had all survived.
Phoenix crew member Paul Kingy boarded the Fakari to search for more survivors with the boat's captain, David Plews. As they scanned the island, Paul saw someone emerge from the ash. It was 19-year-old Jesse Langford. He had been in Hayden's group with his parents and sister. He was near the crater lake when the volcano erupted, and it was miraculous that he survived. Although his entire body, face, torso, arms, hands, legs, and feet were severely burned. Meanwhile, search and rescue helicopters still hadn't arrived, so the Phoenix was on its way back to the mainland, and the passengers and crew were doing their best to care for the injured on board. The people who had on multiple protective layers had the worst burns on their hands and faces, but others were just wearing t-shirts and shorts that day, and their entire bodies from head to toe were burnt. Victims had layers of thick ash in their eyes, ears, mouths, and noses, and the other passengers scraped away the ash to clear their eyes and airways. There were more than 20 survivors on the boat, along with the passengers and crew.
So people on the mainland had watched the eruptions, and some of them knew that their loved ones had been on the island that day. Other skippers blast alerted the Coast Guard, and dispatchers sent 11 rescue choppers. The 2 fastest were like equipped flying emergency rooms and could start treating victims right away. But the helicopter pilots weren't sent to White Island. They were told it was too dangerous to land there. The volcano was still erupting. So instead, they were sent to the Whakatane to pick up victims and transport them to the burn centers.
While this is all happening, there were actually several local helicopter pilots who had seen the eruption and, launched their own rescue operation, because they're like, well, if the freaking Coast Guard's not going to do it, then somebody's got to help these poor people. So we're going to do it. So a man named John Funnell, a 69-year-old search and rescue service veteran, headed to the island shortly after the blast. Pilots Jason Hill and Tom Story also took off in a second helicopter at 2:50, and pilot Mark Law took off a few minutes later. And all Jason and Tom had on board was a first aid kit, and they had no clue what they were flying into at all. A short while later, a 4th helicopter took off at 3:05 with 2 pilots, Tim Barrow and Graham Hopcroft. John Funnell arrived first and circled the island. He had the most experience with rescue operations, and his job was to communicate by radio with the other pilots and by cell phone with the police and Coast Guard.
Stephanie Browett and 19 others were stranded near Crater Lake. She had no idea where her father and sister were, but finally she heard her father Paul calling out her name. And as they landed their choppers, Jason, Tom, and Mark saw the mangled Volcanic Air helicopter that had been thrown from the landing pad, and they realized how strong the blast had to have been and how hard it would have been for anyone to survive it. They exited their choppers into a foot of ash, and even with glasses and gas masks on, their eyes were burning and their throats were already stinging. From their helicopters, they had spotted a group of people near Crater Lake. They ran up the path toward what they hoped would be survivors. They found 20 victims below the rim of the crater. They checked their injuries, put gas masks on them, and gave them water. They reassured the survivors that help was there and they weren't alone. And they also expected the first responders to arrive any minute, and they were planning to start, helping prep them to get transported back to shore. John was still circling ahead in his helicopter when he radioed down with devastating news. The rescue choppers were ordered to stay away from the island. A fleet of 11 helicopters were waiting at the Whakatane, just sitting there, doing nothing, ordered not to go help. And this decision was made in part by St. John Medical Director Dr. Tony Smith, who believed it wasn't safe for them to land on the island and wasn't willing to risk the lives of his team. The pilots on White Island were stunned and unsure of what to do next. Mark was the first to act. He announced that they would rescue the survivors themselves. Jason and Tom jumped into action. Jason ran back down the path to get his helicopter and bring it closer to the victims. And once he landed, they loaded 5 people into it. And Stephanie's father, Paul Browett, was still alive, but he told the pilots to help his daughters before helping him. Stephanie was still conscious when they brought her into the helicopter, and they loaded her father in after her. Jason took off at 3:48 p.m. He talked to survivors the entire flight to try to keep them awake and alive. Mark got his helicopter next. Tom realized that several people who were alive when they got there were now dead. That's how fast things had to move. They were really under the gun.
The 5 pilots had loaded 12 people onto 3 helicopters, and they were on the island for approximately 40 minutes in total. And John was still circling overhead and radioed down when a search and rescue chopper finally arrived. And medical director Tony Smith himself was on board. Tom met them on the shore and said there were 8 bodies and no more survivors. They were ordered to leave the island immediately. All of these pilots were that weren't, part of the Coast Guard. Medical professionals and ambulances were waiting on the mainland to take the survivors right to the hospital. This is crazy too. They actually, when people try to get more information from the staff about, what had happened to their loved ones, they were told nothing and were just sent to a room to wait. And they actually waited for hours, some of them missing the last minutes their family members were alive as they lay dying in the hospital. The family members of the 8 people left on the island were informed that no one was going back to retrieve their bodies and that they may never be able to bury their loved ones. Mark and Tom wanted to go back to get them, but the authorities refused to allow it. It was too dangerous. And that night, a rainstorm caused a mudslide of ash, and it was now impossible to get to the bodies. Military personnel wearing hazmat suits went back 4 days after the eruption on December 13th, where they were able to recover 6 of the 8 bodies.
So the eruption of White Island killed 22 people and severely injured 25. 2 of the people rescued by the helicopter survived, Stephanie Browett and Lisa Dallow. The other 10 died. Stephanie was in the coma for weeks. Paul died about a month after the eruption.
It broke me a little. I wish I could thank my dad and tell him that he was a hero. I wish I could just let him know how amazing his actions were on that day.
Stephanie's recovery has been horrific, as you can imagine. It's been long and painful. She suffered severe burns, and the first 2 joints of her fingers were completely amputated.
This tragedy left a lot of people asking if this disaster could have been avoided completely. In 2013, mud eruptions from the volcano were so dangerous that scientists refused to go to the island. And the last time White Island fully erupted was in 2016. And during this eruption, the entire walkway to Crater Lake was covered with deposits from this eruption. And if tours had been going on, there would have been absolutely no survivors. But the blast happened in the middle of the night, so no one was there. And scientists put out a warning about the eruption, which should have made it clear how dangerous it was to be on the island. And after that eruption happened, tours should have been shut down immediately. But nothing happened. In late 2019, volcanic activity on the island was increasing. And on December 3rd, 6 days before 100 tourists from the cruise ship were brought to the island, the government body that monitors White Island put out a volcanic alert bulletin. And it said that the volcanic alert level remains at 2 and moderate volcanic unrest continues. Again, alert level 2 is the highest level for a volcano before
6 days. The volcano has been at 2. It still went. Why were the tours still going on?
For a volcano before it erupts, and it means there's a chance things will settle down. That's the thing, is they can go up and down, those levels can. But it's much more likely once it reaches that level 2 heading towards level 3 that an eruption is imminent. But regardless of how safe it is, all tours of the island have been stopped indefinitely after this, which honestly we should not be going to an extremely active volcano, period.
Well, our hearts truly go out to anyone who survived the White Island eruption and anyone who didn't survive too. But that is going to be it for our episode today.
So I'll be linking this original video down in the description with the video that I'm using, so you guys can follow up on it and watch the other videos. But all I have to say is, why were they still tours? All this could have been avoided. They could have prevented all that from happening, because the volcano was at number two due for eruption. Why? And I mean, the tour persons are to be blamed 100%, but also the tourists. Like, why would you risk your life? First off, we know that nature can be beautiful. Nature is breathtaking. Nature is like wonderful, but it can also be dangerous. And that just proves it. That proves that nature, although nature is beautiful, it's so all the stones, the colors, the different stuff. But what will happen in the end? To me, it wasn't worth it. Like, I live on an island with a volcano. Although it's not active, it's dormant. The only driving volcano that you can actually go through. I've never been to it, and I live on the island. I mean, I've gone near it to the Silver Springs, but I've never actually went inside. And like the last eruption was like 256 years ago, 1766, if I remember correctly. And that doesn't mean that it would not erupt, but I'm still fearful for my life even when I go near the volcano, because but as we know, there are always warning signs. The volcano shows signs, because this one showed sign, and they didn't take precaution. So guys, take precaution. When you see signs, take them as red flags. Nature is nice, nature is beautiful, but nature can be dangerous. I sympathize with the family members that lost their loved ones in that tragic incident. Like, I got teary eyes while listening to the number of persons who lost their life and the family members who were unsure and saw that happening. Like, that's terrible. I do not want to experience that. But I guess I hope no one goes on tour to that White Island. Please don't. I don't want to be listening to another podcast about what happened because people wasn't taking heed. But like I said, this is the end of the video. Make sure to drop a like on this video, subscribe, leave a comment down below. Will be greatly appreciated by moi. See you guys in another video. Bye bye.